Welcome to the deep dive. We dig through the sources so you don't have to. And today, well, we've got a really extraordinary story for you. We're uncovering the intertwined lives of Nadja and Tamara Bunke.
It really is quite something. It's almost like something from a movie, isn't it? Because it's not just one person's story. It's two, a mother and daughter whose lives were just completely shaped by, well, the biggest upheavals of the 20th century.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're talking escaping persecution, revolutionary struggles across continents, from Russia, Nazi Germany, all the way to Latin America.
Wow. Okay, so let's unpack this then. Our sources trace Nadja's story first, right? Her childhood in Russia, immigration, and then we get into her daughter Tamara's path, which leads to revolution in Bolivia.
Exactly. It's a really gripping look at how these massive historical forces can just, dictate people's lives.
So Nadja first. Born Nadezhda Grigorievna Bader. And you mentioned her background was significant.
Yes. Her father's Jewish name was Gersh. And given the times, that detail becomes, well, incredibly important later on. Her early life was marked by hardship. Only 2 years of school in Russia.
Only 2 years.
Yeah, before the famine, the really terrible famine of 1921-1922, forced the family to just flee. It was pure survival.
Well, I mean, just imagine that, fleeing famine. The sources talk about this incredible journey she took at Christmas 1922. An adventurous ride, they call it.
Adventurous is one word for it.
Right. With her grandmothers, using sledges, even bowls apparently. Hiding in a barn for a week, then crossing into Poland on New Year's Eve.
It sounds almost mythical, doesn't it? Her father met them there, in Ostrog, Poland, before they moved on again.
And the journey didn't stop there.
No, far from it. They eventually arrived in Hamburg, Germany, May 1923. Nadja was 12 and a half, and she talks about how hard it was, this laborious struggle, she called it, to learn German.
And think about that. A young girl, already been through famine, displacement, now a new country, new language.
A completely new world.
And this is where, going through the sources, it struck me how early the anti-Semitism started for her. Even before, the Nazis fully took over.
Right, it wasn't just a Nazi phenomenon. The prejudice was already there.
Exactly. She mentions being called heathen in Hamburg just for being an atheist. And another kid saying they wouldn't kiss her because she was Jewish, even though her parents tried to prepare her.
Experiencing that directly as a child, it must have left a mark.
Definitely. So Easter 1928, she moves to Berlin. She's 16 and a half now. And she gets involved with the Socialist Workers' Youth pretty quickly.
And she had ambitions. She wanted to study construction, architecture, actually worked as a volunteer in building in autumn 33.
But the political climate was changing so fast.
Dramatically. Her plans to marry Erich Bunke, and we should probably say it's usually pronounced Bunker, B-U-N-K-E. Those plans just collapsed. March 1933. Literally a week after the Reichstag fire.
A week, wow.
Yeah. The new reality hit home. A Jewish woman, a German man, especially one involved in socialist groups, suddenly impossible.
Yeah.
Dangerous.
Their personal lives, just casualties of history unfolding right there.
And it got very real, very personal. There's this amazing story about a denunciation. Someone reported communist books in her apartment.
Oh, wow.
And a policeman comes. He's initially quite provocative about the books, but then he shows this incredible discretion. He covers for them, lists harmless books like Schiller and Goethe on his report, not the Soviet ones they actually had, like Gladkov Cement.
That's incredible. A small act of, well, humanity in a terrifying time.
It really is. It shows how, even within the system, individuals could make a difference, take risks.
And then there's this other detail that just speaks volumes. She decided not to register her son Olaf's birth officially.
At the registry office, yeah.
Yeah.
Only police registration.
Why? To protect his father's identity.
Exactly. In that climate, it was a calculated risk, a desperate measure to shield him. It just shows how far removed from normal life they were.
You can feel the walls closing in.
Completely. And the final trigger for leaving Germany, the thing that made them realize they had to go, right now.
What was it?
Her sister got a summons from the Gestapo. That was it. Nadja and her husband knew they had to emigrate immediately. It wasn't a choice anymore, it was survival.
So escape. How did they manage that?
With help from the Paris Relief Committee and the Jewish Aid Organization, they were lifelines for so many. But the journey itself, 4.5 weeks to Argentina.
4.5 weeks. On what kind of ship?
An old Charger Reuni ship, apparently ancient. And they got on using fake papers.
Yeah.
Fictitious 3-month tourist visas, return certificates they never intended to use, just desperate measures.
The risks they took. It's hard to comprehend.
And Nadja herself recounts something from that journey that she called her greatest heroic deed.
Which was?
Intensely breastfeeding her son, Olaf, for 11 months on that ship, through storms, difficult conditions. She emphasizes it was Olaf.
Okay, so the sources are clear. It was her son Olaf on the ship, not Tamara.
Exactly. Tamara wasn't born yet. She was born later in
Yeah.
Argentina. So Nadja's incredible effort on that voyage was for Olaf. It just paints such a vivid picture of her strength.
Absolutely. So they make it to Argentina. But they don't just, settle down quietly. The activism continues.
Oh, yes. Her husband joined an illegal party there in 36. Nadja followed in 45. They got involved with Club Adelante, meaning forward, a German-speaking Jewish emigrant club.
Like finding a community again.
Exactly. And doing solidarity work against fascism. They joined groups like Junta de la Victoria, Merger for Victory, keeping the fight going, even from afar.
And they stayed in Argentina for quite a while.
16 and a half years. Then in 1952, they actually returned to Europe, to the GDR, East Germany.
Back to Germany, but a very different Germany. How did the kids handle that?
Well, Olaf, her son, seemed to adapt okay. But Tamara, she was born Argentine, remember? She was apparently very proud of that identity. Maybe a hint of the independent spirit she'd become known for.
Nadja's story is one of incredible resilience, wouldn't you say? Sort of quiet defiance against history.
Absolutely. But her daughter, Tamara, she inherited that same intense conviction, but channeled it very differently, much more overtly revolutionary and ultimately tragically.
Right. Let's shift focus to Tamara Bunke now. Her life takes this sharp turn onto the world stage.
So Tamara, born in Argentina, November 19, 1937. We know she wasn't the baby on the ship. She moves to the GDR with her parents. In 52, she's 14 and a half.
And she had this passion for music early on.
Yes, very much so. Piano, guitar, accordion, especially Latin American folk music. You can see how her birthplace culture stayed with her, influenced her.
And politically, she got involved young in East Germany.
Very young. Free German Youth at 14, the ruling party, the SED, at 18. She was clearly driven by strong beliefs from early on. And she got involved internationally, too. World Federation Democratic Youth, attending festivals in Vienna, Prague, Moscow.
Havana.
That seems key. It was. She ended up working there for the Association of Rebellious Youth, which later became the Union of Young Communists. She even organized an international student conference. She was really connecting with Latin American revolutionary movements.
Like the Sandinistas.
Exactly. She connected with figures like Carlos Fonseca, founder of the FSLN in Nicaragua. Her commitment was deep. She even joined the People's Defense Militia in Cuba.
So she's deeply embedded in these movements, and then comes this almost unbelievable recruitment.
Right. Che Guevara's Operation Fantasma, the plan to spark revolution across Latin America, starting in Bolivia. And someone named Damaso Tapares was tasked with finding a compañera for this mission.
And he chose Tamara. Out of everyone, that says a lot about how capable she must have been seen.
Absolutely. It meant intense training. Between 1963 and 64, she received instruction from the STB in Prague.
The Czechoslovakian secret police. Wow, this was serious clandestine stuff.
Extremely serious. And that's when she took her nom de guerre, Tanya, in honor of a Soviet partisan, Zoya Kosmodemyanskaya. That name, Tanya, basically became her identity for the mission.
So Tanya goes to Bolivia, October 1964, undercover. What was her cover story?
Laura Gutierrez Bauer, an Argentine folklore expert, supposedly quite right-wing. The idea was to infiltrate Bolivian high society, the political and military elite.
And she actually pulled it off.
Astonishingly well. She got incredibly close to powerful figures, befriended General Alfredo Ovando Candia, head of the army. Even President René Barrientos apparently admired her, took her on holiday with him.
That level of infiltration, it's mind-boggling. The skill, the nerve it must have taken.
It really is. Living a completely fabricated life, day in, day out, under that kind of pressure. A master of deception.
But eventually, the cover gets blown.
Yes, in 1966. We don't have the exact details of how from these sources, but it happened. And that forced her out of the cities and into the jungle, joining Guevara's actual guerrilla force.
So from spy to soldier.
Exactly, a huge shift. She was then responsible for things like procuring food, monitoring radio communications, very different from infiltrating high society.
And her life ends there, in the jungle.
Tragically, yes. August 31st, 1967. She was killed in an ambush by Bolivian Army Rangers. She was apparently trying to escape, already suffering from a leg injury and fever. A very grim end.
Such an intense life lived right on the edge. After going through all this, Nadja's resilience, Tamara's revolutionary path, What really stands out to you?
I think for me, it's this powerful, almost relentless dedication to conviction across two generations, facing just enormous risks, being caught up in these huge historical moments. And you see how the mother's maybe quieter struggle for survival against fascism evolves into the daughter's much more overt armed struggle for revolution. They're different paths, but driven by a similar core of belief, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, absolutely. And it really makes you think, doesn't it? How do you navigate deeply held beliefs when you're faced with these massive, overwhelming historical forces that could just sweep you away? And what kind of mark do lives like these leave? Not just in the big history books, but in the personal choices, the sacrifices made under such extreme pressure. It really pushes you to think about identity, especially identity formed inside revolutionary movements, and what individual sacrifice really means in the grand sweep of history.